One day, you are the one remembering the appointment, keeping track of the paperwork, and asking what needs to happen next. The change may seem small, but you begin to understand that your parents need you to support them too. Maybe not long ago, they were the ones who remembered the details, the ones who called to make sure you got home safely, the ones who seemed to have a practical answer for almost any everyday problem. And now you are sitting beside them at a doctor's appointment, listening carefully to instructions they may not have fully heard, checking a date, asking about a medication, or wondering who will be able to go with them next time. It does not always happen all at once. Sometimes it begins with small things. A phone call asking for help with paperwork, a question they never used to have, a fall that fortunately did not lead to anything serious, repeating something they already said, difficulty driving at night. And almost without realizing it, a new responsibility appears inside you. The hardest part is not simply helping. It is discovering that there are things your help cannot prevent. That is where a quiet resistance begins. You want to be there, but you also want nothing to change. You want to take care of them, but part of you is trying to recover the sense of security you once had. And the more you confuse caring for them with preventing every decline, the easier it becomes for love to mix with an impossible demand. Because supporting your parents does not give you power over time. And yet the mind can behave as though it is supposed to find a way to gain that power. You begin wondering whether you could have done something sooner, whether you should call more often, be there more often, insist more. Maybe you feel uncomfortable leaving after visiting them. Maybe you feel guilty when you enjoy something while knowing they are going through a more fragile stage of life. Or perhaps you answer a repeated question impatiently and then spend hours blaming yourself for it. There does not have to be a major illness for this change to stir something deep within you. It is enough to notice that the people who once seemed like a permanent part of the landscape of your life are changing too. Their energy is not the same. Some decisions are beginning to involve you. Certain conversations you once avoided can no longer be postponed indefinitely. And then a very human temptation appears, trying to reduce uncertainty by controlling more. You ask several times whether they did what they were supposed to do. You prepare for problems that do not exist yet. You organize, correct, remind, insist. Sometimes you even get angry because they do not follow advice that seems obvious to you. And beneath that anger there may be something that is harder to admit. Fear, not necessarily fear of an immediate catastrophe. Sometimes it is fear of change itself, fear of seeing them become more vulnerable, fear of realizing that the relationship is entering a stage you never asked for, fear of sensing that one day you may have to make decisions they are still able to make for themselves today. That fear can make you believe that being a good son or daughter means being prepared for everything. But no one is prepared for everything. You can be responsible and still feel lost. You can love them deeply and still get tired. You can support them patiently one day and have less strength the next. You can know that they need help while, at the same time, missing the years when you were the one who could lean on them without thinking too much about what it cost them to support you. Recognizing this matters because, if you do not, you risk turning every uncomfortable emotion into an accusation against yourself. You tell yourself you should not be tired, that you should not get irritated, that you should not need space, that you should know what to do. And on top of the real burden of caregiving, you add another one: the obligation to always feel good while doing it. That is when resistance begins to multiply the weight. One thing is having to take your father to a doctor's appointment. Another is believing that if the task exhausts you, it means you are selfish. One thing is worrying because your mother is forgetting certain details. Another is spending the night imagining every possible scenario and believing that if you do not anticipate them all, you are being irresponsible. The fact itself and the judgment you place on it do not weigh the same. The situation itself may require time, attention, money, uncomfortable conversations, coordination with siblings, or changes to your routine. All of that is real. It does not disappear simply because you think differently. But judgment adds a demand that does not always help. This shouldn't be happening. They should still be the way they used to be. I should be handling this better. If I do everything right, I can keep things from getting worse. That last thought is especially exhausting because it sounds loving. It sounds responsible. It sounds devoted. But it may be hiding an impossible struggle against reality. Maybe you can schedule an appointment. You cannot guarantee the outcome. You can respectfully insist on a recommendation. You cannot control every decision they make. You can make yourself available many times. You cannot be everywhere. You can be mindful of how you speak to them. You cannot prevent yourself from occasionally being tired, worried, or without answers. Resistance appears when you stop measuring your responsibility by what you can actually do and begin measuring it by everything you wish you could prevent. And that changes even the way you spend time with them. Sometimes you are no longer listening to a simple conversation because your mind is calculating the next problem. You are sitting at the table, but mentally you are already inside a future appointment, a fall that has not happened, an argument with a sibling, or a decision that may still be years away. You want to make the most of the time you have with your parents, but the fear of losing that time pulls you away from the very moment that still exists. That contradiction hurts because it comes from love. You are not trying to control everything because you do not care. Many times, you try to control everything because you care so much that accepting your limitations feels like abandoning them. But those are not the same thing. Accepting a limitation does not mean you stop helping. It means beginning to see more clearly where your actions end and where everything beyond your control begins. For now, you do not need to solve that entire boundary. You only need to start recognizing when you are crossing it internally. You can notice it through one simple sign. When your mind stops asking, "What can I do right now?" and starts demanding, "How can I make sure this never changes?" The first question can lead to a concrete action. The second usually traps you in a task with no end. And maybe that is why, after that appointment, you put the papers away with more tension than necessary. You replay what was said. You wonder whether you asked every question. You criticize yourself for something you said. You start thinking ahead to next week. Meanwhile, your parents are still there. Maybe talking about something ordinary. Maybe asking where you are going to eat. Maybe making a joke you have heard hundreds of times. Life did not stop to solemnly announce that the roles were changing. It continues through ordinary details. And it is precisely inside those details that you can begin to notice your resistance. Not to get rid of it, not to instantly transform yourself into someone completely calm, only to distinguish it from caring. There is a difference between accompanying a difficult reality and mentally fighting to make that reality disappear. One may require effort from you. The other can demand endless effort. Your parents may need you more, and that will bring real decisions. Some will be small, others may not be. But before trying to become someone capable of carrying everything, it is worth looking at how much of the weight comes from what is actually happening, and how much comes from demanding that nothing had ever changed. That distinction does not solve the road ahead, but it opens the possibility of walking it differently. Maybe you cannot return your parents to an earlier stage of life or guarantee what comes next. Maybe you can begin to stand beside them without turning every change into an internal battle against time. And once you begin distinguishing between caring and fighting against the passage of time, a less visible task appears. Learning to look at what is happening without turning every change into a threat you must immediately solve. It is not easy, because when someone you love begins to need more help, your attention becomes watchful. You start noticing details that used to pass unnoticed. The way they walk, how long they take to answer, whether they remember an appointment, whether they repeat a story, whether they seem more tired, whether they drive the way they used to, whether they fully understood an instruction. That attention may be necessary. Sometimes it helps you notice something important, organize a situation better, or prevent a specific problem. But it can also become a constant state of inner surveillance, as though lowering your guard for a few hours would somehow make you irresponsible. And then you are no longer caring only when care is needed. You begin caring even in your imagination. While you work, you wonder whether they have eaten. While you are with your children, you remember something your father said on the phone. You go out with friends and check your phone several times. You wake up in the middle of the night and replay a conversation that did not seem so important during the day. The mind tries to anticipate, because anticipation creates a temporary feeling of control. But thinking about a possibility 10 times does not give you 10 times more ability to deal with it. There are moments when the most responsible response is to act. Make a phone call, schedule an appointment, talk to a sibling, arrange some help, ask directly what they need. And there are other moments when you have already done what was within your power. Learning to recognize the difference is difficult because love does not come with an on and off switch. You cannot simply say, "I've done my part, so now I'll stop worrying." Emotions do not work that way. You can have everything properly organized and still feel uneasy. You can know your mother is not alone and still look at your phone. You can confirm that your father got home safely and continue imagining what could happen tomorrow. Accepting that you do not have complete control over a situation does not eliminate concern. What can change is what you do with that concern. You can allow every worry to automatically become an order, or you can observe it before obeying it. Sometimes it is enough to name the fact precisely. My father has an appointment on Thursday. My mother has been more tired lately. Today, they did not answer the phone for an hour. They need help with this paperwork. When you describe what is happening that way, without immediately adding a conclusion, a small amount of distance appears. Not because the situation matters less, but because you have not yet turned it into a complete story about the future. That is very different from thinking, "This is going to get worse. Soon they will not be able to take care of themselves. I will have to handle everything. I will not know how. My whole life is going to change. Maybe some of those things will happen one day. Maybe they will not. But living through all of them in advance does not necessarily prepare you better. It may simply leave you exhausted before the time for action even comes." Looking without forcing does not mean looking with indifference. It means allowing each reality to have its actual size. If there is a problem today, deal with today's problem. If there is a decision to make the decision that belongs to this moment. If there is nothing to decide yet, you can recognize that your mind is trying to solve in advance a life that has not happened yet. There is another difficulty. Your parents are still adults, and that truth can collide with your instinct to protect them. Maybe it seems completely obvious to you that they should change a habit. Stop driving under certain circumstances. Ask for help. Get a medical checkup. Eat differently. Organize certain documents. Accept a limitation they are not yet ready to accept. And then frustration appears because you are willing to help, but they do not always want to be helped in the way you believe is best. It is easy to think that if you insist enough, eventually they will understand. Sometimes you will need to insist. Sometimes there will be safety issues that should not be ignored. Sometimes difficult conversations will be necessary. But even in those situations, there is a boundary worth looking at honestly. Helping your parents does not mean turning them into people whose will no longer matters simply because they are getting older. The change in roles is not always a complete reversal. You do not simply become the parent of your parents. They still have preferences, pride, fear, habits, and the right to participate in decisions affecting their lives for as long as they are able to do so. And that can be uncomfortable because it requires holding two truths at once. They may need more from you, and they may still not want you deciding everything for them. Caring well sometimes means learning to tolerate that tension. It does not mean abandoning them, but it also does not mean beginning to decide everything on their behalf. You can listen to what they need, ask questions when something is unclear, suggest a solution, and explain why a particular decision worries you. Then comes the hardest part. Accepting that helping someone does not always mean getting them to do what you think is best. Think again about that appointment. You are holding the paperwork. You listened carefully. You remember the next appointment. Maybe you ask a question your parents had not thought to ask. But you can look at that scene differently. You are not replacing them. You are present. You do not have to turn every document in your hands into proof that everything now depends on you. You can help without mentally taking complete control of a life that has never been completely under anyone's control. The difference seems small until you try to live it, because an uncomfortable question appears. How often are you helping because help is genuinely needed? And how often are you trying to calm your own fear by doing something, anything? The answer will not always be clear. Sometimes both things will be mixed together. You might call because it makes sense to check on something, and also because you need reassurance. You might insist on an appointment because it is reasonable, while also feeling anxious because you cannot guarantee the outcome. You do not need to judge yourself for that mixture. Just see it. When you see it, you begin to recover some inner freedom. Before calling for the third time, you can wait a few minutes and ask yourself whether there is actually any new information. Before imagining 10 consequences, you can return to the present fact. Before blaming yourself for not being there more often, you can honestly consider what you are capable of sustaining without neglecting your own life too. Because there is another painful confusion. Believing that caring well means leaving less and less room for your own life. Canceling plans. Giving up rest. Always being available. Answering immediately. Feeling as though asking for help would mean you had failed. But love is not measured by how exhausted you are willing to become. There will be stages when you have to give a great deal, maybe more than you would like. There will be difficult weeks, urgent decisions, and moments when your priorities truly need to change. But a demanding season does not require you to turn permanent sacrifice into your identity. You are also part of the reality you are trying to care for. Your rest matters because you will need to come back tomorrow. Your work matters too. Your relationships, your health, and if you have children of your own, they matter too. Caring for your parents does not mean the rest of your life has stopped needing you. Even an afternoon when you are not thinking about your parents can have a legitimate place within a responsible life. This may trigger guilt. Guilt often says, if you can do more, you should do more. But you could always do more. You could call one more time, visit one more day, read one more article, check one more possibility, give up one more activity. If the possibility of doing more becomes your standard, there will never be a moment when you have done enough. So you need a different standard. Not how much you could give until you collapse from exhaustion, but what the situation actually requires, what is truly within your ability, and what you can sustain without turning caregiving into quiet resentment. There will be days when you do not handle it well. You will respond impatiently. You will postpone a phone call. You will get tired of listening to the same concern for the fourth time. You will wish someone else would take care of it. And afterward, an inner voice may use that single moment to judge your entire relationship. But one difficult afternoon does not summarize years of love. A boundary does not erase love. Exhaustion does not make your care insincere. Looking without forcing also means allowing the experience to be imperfect. You do not have to become a flawless version of yourself in order to accompany your parents with dignity. What matters is returning again and again to what actually depends on you. How you speak to them, what questions you ask, what responsibility you decide to take on, what boundaries you need to express, and when it is reasonable to ask for help, and also recognizing something that can be very difficult. There may come a moment in the day when you have already done enough. You can close the door after a visit and allow the afternoon to continue. Put your phone away for a while. Sit down to dinner without feeling that you are abandoning anyone. Return to your own home, your partner, your children, a book, a conversation, or simply silence without feeling as though you are betraying anyone. The situation will still exist tomorrow, and you will need to continue existing within it. The doctor's appointments, the paperwork, the dates, and the decisions will not disappear because you have learned to look at them more calmly. But they can stop feeling like a sentence hanging over everything that will happen in the future. You can hold those papers for what they are. What needs your attention right now? Nothing more. That clarity still does not solve how you will live through future changes. There will be moments when accepting a limitation is not enough, and you will have to make more difficult decisions. But learning to see clearly during a quiet moment is the beginning. After that, you will have to learn how to preserve that clarity when fear returns and asks you to control what no human being can fully control. And that clarity begins to be tested when it is no longer simply about going to an appointment or handling some paperwork, but about accepting that certain things may never be the way they used to be. Maybe one day your father will stop driving. Maybe your mother will need help doing something she always did by herself. Maybe there will be a conversation about money, about a house that has become too large, about who should have certain keys, or about what to do if they eventually need more support. These are strange conversations because they are about the present and the future at the same time. While you have them, part of you still remembers those same people years earlier. You see them as they are now, but an image also appears of who they were when you were younger. The person who could drive for hours without thinking twice. The person who solved problems. The person who organized the household. The person who always knew where everything was. And maybe that is when you discover that you are not only adapting to their changing needs, you are also slowly saying goodbye to a version of them. Not because they are gone. They are still here. But certain things change. Some abilities decline. Some habits are no longer possible. Some conversations carry a weight they never used to have. Accepting this can bring sadness even when no tragedy has occurred. And that sadness does not need to be corrected. Not every painful emotion is evidence that you are handling the situation badly. Some pain appears precisely because something matters. You can look at your parents and feel gratitude, tenderness, and fear within the same minute. You can help them put away a jacket, listen to a familiar story, prepare a meal, or drive them home and notice a sadness you cannot fully explain. You do not have to immediately turn that sadness into a problem. Sometimes it is enough to recognize what it contains. The awareness that time is passing. For much of life, you can relate to time as though it were almost an abstract quantity. You know the years are passing, but you do not always see them, until you begin to see them in the people you love. Then comes the urge to make the most of every opportunity. Visit more. Make conversations last longer. Ask the questions you never asked. Create memories while you still can. And all of that can be meaningful. But an impossible demand can appear here too. The pressure to make every encounter special, because you know there will not be an infinite number of them. That pressure can steal the naturalness from what you still have. Not every conversation needs to be deep. Not every visit has to become an extraordinary memory. Sometimes being together means talking about something unimportant, arguing about what to eat, going with them to buy something ordinary, or listening to a story you already know. The value of a moment does not depend on your ability to constantly feel how valuable it is. You can understand that time is limited without spending every minute watching the clock. And maybe that is a more mature form of presence. Not clinging to the moment, simply being in it. There will be times when you have to make decisions you do not like. Set a boundary. Ask for outside help. Speak with other family members. Say clearly that you cannot handle everything alone. Someone may disagree. Even your own parents may interpret certain decisions differently than you do. Accepting reality does not mean obeying every expectation either. Caring does not require you to destroy your own life in order to prove that you love them. There is a difference between being available and having no boundaries, between supporting someone and taking on every burden, between hearing a need and automatically assuming that you are the only person who must solve it. If you have siblings, you may also discover another uncomfortable truth. Not everyone will experience this stage in the same way. One sibling may be more present. Another may live far away. Someone may minimize a problem you consider important. Another may have plenty of opinions while contributing very little. And then, in addition to worrying about your parents, you begin getting angry with everyone else. That anger may be justified. The division of responsibility may truly be unfair. There may be conversations that need to happen, but even there, you will have to distinguish between asking for something reasonable and spending months waiting for everyone to respond exactly the way you believe they should. Sometimes you will be able to negotiate a better distribution of responsibilities. Other times, you will have to decide what you are willing to do, even if other people do not change. Not because the unfairness no longer matters, but because placing your entire emotional stability in someone else's behavior adds another burden to a situation that is already difficult. And then you can return once again to that simple scene. The appointment, the papers, the date of the next visit. At first, holding those papers seemed to confirm that something important had changed between you. Now you can look at them differently. Keeping track of those papers does not make you responsible for everything that will happen next. That day, maybe your responsibility is simply remembering a date. Tomorrow, making a phone call. Another day, recognizing that you need help and saying clearly that you cannot do everything alone. And there will also be days when there is nothing to solve. Days when you can simply sit beside them, talk, share a meal, and then return to your own life. The maturity of this kind of care does not come from eliminating uncertainty. It comes from refusing to live as though every uncertainty requires permanent vigilance from you. Your parents will continue to change, and you will have to adapt to those changes too. There will be difficult decisions, more exhausting stages, and moments when you may not know what the best response is. There will even be times when you are wrong. One day, you may think you should have been more patient, or that you should have called, or that a conversation could have gone differently. There is no way to go through something this human without leaving some imperfections behind. So perhaps there is another demand worth giving up: the desire to go through this stage of life in such a way that you will never have anything to regret. That is not entirely within your control either. You can act carefully. You can listen better. You can repair things after responding badly. You can apologize when you make a mistake. You can change a decision when new information appears. You can try to be present with what you know today, but you cannot guarantee that one day you will look back without a single doubt. Life does not offer that kind of certificate. What you can do is return, again and again, to a more humble question. What does this moment ask of me? Not what will next year demand. Not how can I prevent every loss. Not how can I make sure I am prepared for everything. This moment, maybe it asks for patience. Maybe it asks for a decision. Maybe it asks you to call the doctor. Maybe it asks you to listen even when you do not have a solution. Maybe it asks you to accept that your father has made a decision you do not like. Maybe it asks you to speak honestly with your mother. Maybe it asks you to rest because you have been going for too long without a break. Looking at life this way does not eliminate the future. It simply prevents the future from occupying the entire present. And this matters because one of the most painful risks of accompanying the aging of the people you love is beginning to see them only as people who are aging. You stop seeing your father and see only his limitations. You stop seeing your mother and see only the things she needs help with. Every phone call becomes a check-in. Every visit becomes supervision. Every conversation becomes an assessment of how they are doing. But they are still more than the things they struggle to do. They still have tastes, quirks, memories, opinions, curiosity, humor, stories, contradictions. Supporting them also means allowing the relationship to continue being a relationship, not merely a responsibility. They may need you to remind them of something, but perhaps they also need every conversation not to revolve around what they are losing. And you need that too. You need to remember that caring for someone is not only about managing difficulties. Sometimes it is about sharing an ordinary afternoon. Maybe that is the most important transformation of all. At first, you may feel that this reversal of roles means you have to carry everything. Then you begin to understand that supporting someone does not mean controlling everything. It means making yourself available for what you genuinely can do, accepting help when you need it, recognizing your limits, making decisions when the moment calls for them, and also stopping the internal argument with the fact that time moves forward. Not because you like it, not because it stops hurting, not because you are no longer afraid, but because fighting reality does not bring any previous stage of life back. You can accept that your parents are aging and still wish they were 20 years younger. You can feel sadness and continue enjoying their company. You can be tired and still love them. You can need distance one day and return the next with greater presence. You can be afraid of losing them without turning every encounter into a goodbye. That matters because anticipating a loss does not prevent the pain that may come in the future. Sometimes it only causes you to start losing someone in your mind, while that person is still standing right in front of you. Maybe today you will go with them to another appointment. You will listen to some instructions. You will put away the paperwork. You will check the date of the next appointment. But you no longer have to look at those papers as proof that everything has changed in some unbearable way. You can look at them as one concrete responsibility within one concrete day. Then you will walk outside. Maybe you will talk about something completely ordinary. Maybe one of them will ask where you are going to eat. And for a few minutes, you will not have to solve time. You will only have to be there. You cannot stop them from getting older. You cannot guarantee that nothing difficult will happen. You cannot care for them so perfectly that life stops being fragile. But you can decide how you will be present while that life continues unfolding. With attention, without constant vigilance. With responsibility, without giving yourself powers you do not have. With boundaries, without turning them into indifference. With tenderness, without demanding that everything remain the same. And perhaps, in this way, the change that began inside you can finally settle into something less painful. You do not return to being the child who never had to think about these things. But you also do not need to become someone capable of handling everything. You can occupy a more realistic place, the place of an adult who accompanies the people they love, knowing they cannot save them from time, but they can offer their presence while time passes. There may still be sadness. You may worry again. Some nights, your mind may return to scenarios that have not happened. That does not erase what you have learned. It simply gives you another opportunity to return to what is actually here. A phone call you can make, a conversation you can have, a boundary you need to express, a hand you can still hold, and a life that, precisely because it cannot remain unchanged forever, deserves to be accompanied without using up the entire present trying to prevent it from changing. If even one idea from this video helped you see your life more clearly, share it with someone who may need it too. Wisdom that is not shared is lost. This is Stoic spirit. Until next time.